Hey guys, welcome back to Father and Son Investing. I want to talk to you about Clover and what's going on with Clover Health. You may have noticed that the stock price has been climbing in the last week or so. We'll talk about why that's happening and what is on the horizon for Clover. Stay tuned. All right, Clover Health. Those of you who bought in early paid around $10 to $11 a share. And then after the merger announcement came out, it certainly shot right up, made it up to about $17.50 a share. It then got hit by the Hindenburg short seller report. I made two videos about that, by the way. If you haven't seen those videos, I'd encourage you to go back and watch them because it goes into a lot of detail about those accusations and gives you my perspective. Some of you may not know that I am a physician, and so when I read those Hindenburg reports and Clover's responses, I'm taking that from the perspective of somebody who's in medicine. Well, certainly after that Hindenburg report came out, the share price has just taken a beat down and got as low as about 6 something a share recently. If you bought in then, you're pretty happy. You're up a lot in the last few weeks. Why is the share price going up? Well, there are two things happening right now. I detailed part of that in my last video about the Clover short squeeze, but there was a little bit of inaccurate data in there. Not inaccurate on my part, but I was using the data that was supplied, so we'll talk about that. So this is an article in Benzinga talking about Clover Health stock rally continuing despite confusion over the short interest. Well, what was that confusion? Recently, Benzinga had reported that S3 Partners said that the Clover short interest was 144%. If you're not familiar with what short interest means and that percentage, imagine the number of shares that are being shorted. So say a stock has 100 million shares and 40 million of them are being shorted, meaning somebody has borrowed that stock from a broker-dealer, already sold it at the current price and hopes to reacquire it at a lower price, and thus the profit they make is the difference between where they sold it and where they rebought it and returned it to the broker-dealer. So Benzinga, courtesy of S3, had reported that the short interest was 144%. Now, sometimes people, when they're calculating that, they take into account the number of shares that are readily available. So shares that are locked up by an insider are not going to be readily available, and shares that are locked up in institutions might not necessarily be readily available. So some people are going to try to calculate the short interest or the short percent of float based upon only the readily available shares and not necessarily the total shares that a company has outstanding. That can create some confusion, and really it needs to be apples to apples. You can't have some people doing it one way and some people doing it another way. So that had gotten calculated by S3. They said as a mistake, they said S3 said FactSet was not classifying the CEO's 83.6 million shares as part of its float. I can see why they wouldn't do that because those shares aren't necessarily readily available. But in order to make comparables between companies, we need to do it all the same. So then they came back and said, oh, our mistake. Really, the short percent of float is only 36.9%. Well, that's a huge difference. It's still a lot, but it's a huge difference. I think it's still something that needs to be taken into account because if those other shares are not readily available and a short seller has to cover their position, the only shares that they can buy are the ones that are readily available. So kind of keep that in mind, but when we're trying to compare apples to apples, at least we'll do it in one uniform way. So that could be one reason why the predicted short squeeze on Clover didn't gain a whole bunch of steam. Now that doesn't mean that these short sellers are out of the woods, though, because there are people on Reddit who are still talking about Clover and driving up the price. Now this is independent of the value of the company. I talked about a short squeeze on my last video, so if you're not familiar with how that works, go ahead and watch that. There's some good graphics in there that will help you understand it. Nevertheless, if you are already a shareholder, hey, I don't mind the price going up. Fantastic. If it gets to $30 or $40 a share, I'm going to sell because I know at some point it's going to come back down and I'll buy it again. Now, here's another reason why the price of Clover may have been increasing. There has been rumor, or at least news reported, that many of the Democrats in the United States Congress have been pushing the president to lower the Medicare age. Currently in the United States, it's 65. If you're not familiar with how Medicare works, go back and watch my first video about Clover. I explain in detail the Medicare system and what the different parts are, Part A, Part B, Part C, Part D, so that you have a general background of how that works. Anyway, the members of Congress, many of them, are pushing the president to lower the Medicare age to 60. Now, what would that do? Well, according to this article written by CBS News, it says that if they lowered the age to 60 from its current 65, it would expand coverage to more than 23 million people. Now, some members of Congress are pushing to lower it even more. Some want it down to 55 years. If they did that, it would expand it to 40 million people in the United States. There's one senator, Bernie Sanders, who wants it to go down to age 50. So imagine if overnight an additional 23 million people were added potentially to the Medicare rolls. Well, Clover certainly will stand to gain a decent percentage of those new enrollees. One of the things that these new enrollees like about Clover is the out-of-pocket cost and the additional benefits that Clover provides. Medicare Part A really only covers a few things, but because these Medicare Advantage plans come in, they can say, oh, in addition to what Medicare Part A covers, we'll cover these other things for you. Now, certainly the speculation was that the president, who is addressing Congress this evening, would include these Medicare expansion proposals within his speech that he's going to be making to Congress. That, however, is not in there. I actually went to the whitehouse.gov site and read through the president's plan here. There's absolutely nothing in there at the moment about Medicare expansion. That doesn't mean it won't happen, though. Now, do I think they can get it down to 55 years? No, I don't. I think there are two senators that will really probably not stand for that. Joe Manchin from West Virginia and Senator Sinema from Arizona. They seem to be more moderate, but I think that they could probably get them to sign off on taking it down to 60 years. So certainly that will add 23 million people to the Medicare rolls. So that can be another reason why people might be interested in investing in Clover, because there may be a massive expansion of their potential enrollees soon. Of course, that's all speculative. That has to be able to make it through both the houses of Congress, but knowing that the Democrats are in charge, and if those two senators will sign off, they can do it. What's the other news going on with Clover today? Well, they announced that they will do their first quarter 2021 financial results on May 17th. So oftentimes stocks might run up as we get close to their quarterly reports, and then of course oftentimes they fall right after, or sometimes even just before those quarterly reports. Now, I'll tell you that there are people out there warning you to stay away from Clover Health. I certainly can understand that perspective. Again, the stock price rise is not necessarily based upon the qualities of the company, although I think this is a good company, and I think ultimately we'll see that it pays to have invested at these low levels. This stock price may be more involved with the short squeeze and the folks on Reddit. Therefore, somebody is going to get left holding the bag. If this gets to $30 or $40 a share and you purchase it, there's a good chance you're going to get left holding the bag. I don't plan to purchase anything at that level. I've already got a number of shares of Clover that I'm satisfied with. I'll be happy to just watch them rise. So I don't plan on buying during this particular time. This article also talks about Microvision, which is another stock that I own. I purchased it way back when it was about $2.40 a share or so, and I certainly am not buying any of it now while it's in the 20s. The company, I don't think, is anywhere near that level, but you know, I'm happy to have purchased my shares and seen them climb about. But I'm happy to have purchased my shares and see them increase about 10 times. I think you have it then. My overall take on Clover Health, good company. I think that I plan to stay in this for the long term. Even if there's a short squeeze and I sell it, I plan to reacquire it when the price comes back down. I think that a lot of those issues that were raised in the Hindenburg report aren't as important as people might make them out to be. Please go back and watch those two videos that I did, part 1 and part 2. And I think that if Medicare is going to be expanding, which I think it has a decent chance to do based upon the number of people in Congress who are getting excited about this, Clover Health stands to gain a substantial amount of those enrollees and hopefully thus increase their revenue and start to increase their bottom line, which has been negative as so many companies are who are in the initial stages of their development. Now, this video channel is all about trying to get young people investing. Clover is going to be less of a win immediately, I think, for a young person. Sometimes it's important for them to see their stock portfolio value going up to help them get excited about purchasing stock. It's always kind of sad for them if you just purchase and suddenly it goes way down. This may be one that's not great for a young person to invest a lot in anyway. The other video that I'm putting out today about Bloom Energy is more likely to be a winner for a young person who's just starting out. So if you're looking for one, think about Bloom. Clover, maybe. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a thumbs up. That's really important to YouTube's algorithm, and we'd love to have you as a subscriber. Until next time, enjoy your investing.